You don't discover the truth because someone tells you. You discover it because behavior can't lie forever. A man can control his words. He can think before he speaks. He can choose what to say and what to leave out, but he cannot perfectly control his patterns. And when something in his life has changed, especially something he doesn't want you to know about, his patterns shift immediately, not weeks later, not months later, right away. The mistake most people make is they wait for one big obvious moment, one dramatic sign, one undeniable proof, but that's not how human psychology works. Behavior doesn't reveal itself in one giant clue. It reveals itself in clusters. It's 5 or 6 small shifts happening at the same time. That's the signal. That's when you stop listening to what he says and start watching what he does, because guilt changes behavior, new excitement changes behavior, secrecy changes behavior. And when all three are happening together inside one person, he starts acting like a slightly different version of himself without even realizing it. If you've ever felt something shift before you could explain why, keep watching, because what you're about to understand will stop you from confusing yourself in situations that were never actually confusing at all. The very first thing that changes is emotional distance. And this one is tricky because it doesn't always look cold or harsh. In fact, it can be extremely quiet. He may still reply to your messages. He may still show up when he's supposed to. He may still say the right things at the right moments. But something in the quality feels different. The warmth feels slightly lower. The attention feels divided. The connection feels thinner than it used to. This happens because emotional presence requires mental energy. And when a man's mind is somewhere else, whether it's excitement, guilt, or a secret, he simply cannot give the same emotional depth as before. Conversations start becoming surface level. He stops asking about small things that matter to you. He stops being curious about your day the way he used to be. Replies feel like they're coming from obligation rather than genuine desire to talk, and the effort drops. Emotional effort always drops first before anything else becomes visible. You might also notice that he doesn't react the same way anymore. Before, he would laugh more, tease more, engage more. Now his responses feel flat, quieter, less expressive. That's not nothing. That's emotional energy going somewhere else. And then physical distance follows, slightly shorter interactions. Less eye contact held, less natural closeness, not always dramatic, just quietly different. The thing about emotional distance is that you feel it before you see it. Your instincts pick it up before your eyes do. It feels like a door that's no longer fully open, a small invisible wall that wasn't there before. Pay attention to that feeling. It's rarely wrong. Then comes over-explaining, and this one is deeply psychological. When a man has nothing to hide, his explanations are simple, direct, clean. He tells you what happened, and that's enough. But when someone is managing a hidden truth, their brain shifts into a different mode, a covering mode. And in that mode, explanations become long, detailed, layered, and sometimes completely unnecessary. He starts giving you information you never even asked for, filling in gaps before you even think to question them. This happens because guilt creates mental pressure. A person hiding something isn't just telling you a story. They're simultaneously thinking about what to include, what to leave out, how to sound natural, and how to make sure every detail lines up. That pressure leaks into the way they talk. They overtalk. They repeat the same point in different ways. They add extra names, places, timings, traffic details, side conversations that aren't relevant to anything you asked. The goal isn't to inform you. The goal is to sound believable. And here's what makes it obvious when you know what to look for. Real stories are slightly messy. People remember things naturally and imperfectly. But a prepared story sounds structured, organized, almost too logical, because the person telling it was thinking about it beforehand. You might also notice he explains things even when you're not suspicious at all. You ask a simple question and get a full timeline of the day. That's not always honesty. Sometimes that's strategy. And if you ask one small follow-up question, watch how fast he adds more details or gets slightly irritated. That urgency to close the topic quickly is one of the clearest signs that something underneath it isn't right. Eye contact and physical closeness also change, and these two things are controlled far more by emotion than by choice. It's very difficult to look directly into someone's eyes for a long time when you're carrying guilt. Eye contact creates emotional exposure. And emotional exposure feels deeply uncomfortable when there's something to hide. So the eye contact shifts. He looks at his phone more while talking. He glances around the room. He breaks contact more frequently. He keeps conversations shorter so there's less face-to-face time overall. Before he would hold your gaze while listening. Now he looks away more often. Before he seemed visually engaged. Now he seems visually somewhere else. These aren't random changes. The brain is reducing emotional pressure by reducing connection. And physical closeness follows the same pattern. Touch, hugs, sitting near each other, all of these create emotional intimacy. And when a man is hiding something, intimacy triggers guilt. So he subconsciously pulls back, sits a little farther, ends interactions slightly sooner, avoids situations where physical closeness lasts too long. Sometimes the opposite happens, and this is important too. He suddenly increases physical affection, but it feels wrong. It feels rushed, mechanical. Like it's coming from obligation rather than feeling. That's compensation behavior. He's trying to act more loving than usual so that you don't notice that something has changed. Both patterns, pulling back and overcompensating, come from the same internal place. Guilt trying to manage itself through behavior. Then his behavior swings between unusually nice and unusually irritated, and both extremes come from the same internal conflict. When a man feels guilty, his behavior often shifts to one of two places. He either becomes extra attentive, extra caring, extra generous, or he becomes easily snappy, impatient, and defensive. Both reactions are driven by internal pressure. When he becomes unusually nice, it's often an unconscious attempt to balance his guilt. By doing more good things, he tries to make himself feel less like someone doing something wrong. So the compliments increase, the small gestures come back. He replies faster, he seems more present. But the detail that matters is the sudden shift. If this behavior is very different from his normal pattern, it's not just kindness, it's overcorrection. And on the other side, some men react to guilt with irritation instead. Guilt creates internal stress. And stress that has nowhere to go often comes out sideways as anger or annoyance. He may get irritated over things that never bothered him before. Normal questions start sounding like accusations to him. Small moments of friction become bigger arguments. This happens because when someone is managing a secret, they feel emotionally on edge constantly, and people on edge react faster and harder than usual. He may also use arguments to create distance on purpose, even if it's unconscious. Because when there's emotional distance, there's less closeness, and less closeness means less guilt pressing on him in the moment. Watch for the inconsistency. One day he's warm and caring. The next day he's cold and irritated over nothing. That emotional unpredictability is itself the signal. Phone behavior is one of the most modern and visible places where hidden behavior shows up. And the word that matters most here is suddenly. Someone who has always been private with their phone is just a private person. But someone who was completely relaxed with their phone and then suddenly becomes protective of it without any clear reason, that shift is what tells the story. The phone starts going face down every time a notification comes in. Before, it sat anywhere, screen up, no concern about who saw what. Now it flips over instantly. That reflex is automatic. It happens faster than thinking because the brain is trying to block information before anyone sees it. The phone also starts traveling with him everywhere, to the bathroom, to the kitchen for 30 seconds. Rooms he would never have taken it into before. He doesn't want it out of his reach because control over the phone means control over what you can see. Notifications go silent. Message previews disappear from the lock screen. Passwords appear where there were none before, and the reaction when you get close while he's on his phone becomes noticeable. He switches apps quickly, angles the screen away, locks it faster than usual. These are all reflexes, not plans, but the most specific pattern to watch is this. He's clearly using his phone often. You can see he's active online scrolling, but replies to you slow down. That gap between his phone activity and his response time to you is one of the clearest behavioral indicators of where his attention is actually going. His daily routine starts changing without a real explanation. Human beings build stable patterns. Sleep times, wake times, when they eat, when they're free, when they communicate. These patterns don't shift without a reason, and when a man's routine suddenly rearranges itself, especially his free time, something new has entered his schedule that requires space and time. The important detail is not that routines change. Life gets busy, that's real. The detail is that the change is sudden and the explanations are vague. New, unavailable times appear. Specific evenings, certain afternoons, particular weekends where he's consistently hard to reach. When you ask what he's doing, the answer exists, but it's thin. Work, meeting, helping someone, just busy. Real schedule changes come with real explanations because there's nothing to protect. Vague answers protect something. Communication timing shifts too. He used to message at night. Now he says he sleeps early. He used to call after work. Now he's suddenly occupied after work every day. And new activities appear, new gym schedule, new project, new friends mentioned briefly. Any one of these alone is meaningless. But several new elements appearing together at the same time usually means his life structure is being rearranged to create space for something he hasn't told you about. The inconsistency is also important. Some days he's completely free and relaxed. Other days he's totally unavailable with no logical reason tied to his work or responsibilities. That inconsistency often happens when someone is managing two separate schedules and trying to keep them from overlapping. He becomes mentally distracted and not fully present, and this is often one of the earliest internal signs before the external behaviors fully develop. Presence isn't just about being in the same room, it's about where the focus is. When a man is fully engaged, he listens actively, he responds with real thought. He reacts in the moment to what you're saying, but when his attention is divided, there's a drop in engagement that's subtle but consistent. He starts forgetting things you told him. Not because he doesn't care, but because he wasn't truly present when you said them. His brain was somewhere else, so the information never fully landed. Responses feel slightly off, slightly too slow or too generic, like he's replying on autopilot rather than actually hearing you. He drifts during conversations. His eyes wander. He picks up his phone mid-conversation. He seems to be thinking about something else while you're talking. And even when he tries to stay engaged, the consistency isn't there. Curiosity also fades. When a man is emotionally present, he naturally asks questions and follows up on what you've shared. When his mind is elsewhere, that curiosity disappears. Conversations start feeling one-sided. The depth is gone. It feels functional rather than meaningful. This mental absence is significant because attention always shifts before actions do. Before the behavior becomes obvious on the outside, the mind has already moved. And if you've been feeling like you're talking to someone who's physically there but somehow gone at the same time, trust that feeling. It's one of the most honest things your instincts will ever tell you. He starts picking small fights to create emotional distance. And this pattern is almost always unconscious, which is what makes it so confusing. When a man is carrying internal conflict or guilt, being emotionally close feels like pressure. Closeness means he might be read more clearly. Closeness means questions might come. Closeness means the chance of being understood and potentially exposed goes up. So instead of sitting with that discomfort, he releases it through small arguments. The topics are never really the point. It could be something minor you said, a habit he suddenly has a problem with, a completely normal expectation that he now frames as too much. The reaction is always bigger than the situation deserves. And after the argument, there's distance, less communication, cooler tone, less connection. And that distance is exactly what he needed, even if he couldn't explain why. Defensiveness also increases during this pattern. Questions that would have been completely normal before now feel like accusations to him. Simple check-ins feel like pressure. This happens because when someone is internally on edge, their tolerance for anything that feels like scrutiny drops significantly. They react faster, harder, more emotionally than the moment calls for. Old issues sometimes get brought back up too. Arguments that were already resolved suddenly reappear. This is a way of creating tension without directly addressing what's actually wrong. It shifts focus, it creates space, and that space reduces the pressure of guilt in the short term. The fights feel random and confusing because they don't follow logical patterns. But they're not random. They're a behavioral response to internal conflict being managed through external distance. And finally, he suddenly develops a strong new need for privacy and independence that feels different from anything before. Privacy in a relationship is healthy. Everyone deserves personal space. But the sign here isn't privacy. It's the sudden dramatic increase in it. When this shift appears quickly, it usually means there's something new in his life that he doesn't want to be questioned about. You'll start hearing phrases like, "I need more space," or "I don't have to explain everything to you," or "You're too controlling." And on the surface, those things can sound reasonable. But the timing is everything. If these statements arrive without a major conflict or clear reason, they're often not about genuine personal boundaries. They're about creating protection around a part of his life he doesn't want visible. Because when someone is hiding something, normal questions start feeling like threats. So instead of answering the questions, he reframes the dynamic. He makes the questions themselves the problem. Suddenly you're the one who's too curious, too present, too involved. And while the focus shifts to your behavior, his behavior gets less scrutiny. Parts of his life that were once open start closing quietly. Certain friends stop being mentioned, certain plans get vague, answers get shorter. The natural details that people share when they're emotionally open disappear. And his language shifts too. More emphasis on individual freedom, more talk about doing his own thing, more focus on separation than togetherness. None of these things are wrong in isolation. But when they all arrive together suddenly and strongly, they form a pattern. And that pattern is someone trying to create a version of their life that is less connected, less visible, and less accountable. Because the less you know about the details, the easier it is to keep something hidden inside them. And here is what ties all of this together. You will almost never see just one of these signs on its own. That is the most important thing to understand. A single behavioral change means very little. Life is complicated. People have bad days, people get stressed, people go through phases, but when you start noticing 3, 4, 5 of these patterns appearing at the same time, that is not coincidence. That is not overthinking, that is a cluster, and clusters are what psychology teaches us to look for because human behavior does not lie in single moments. It lies in repeated patterns that show up consistently across different situations and different days. The truth is never hidden in one place. It is spread across 100 small moments that most people talk themselves out of noticing. You dismiss the first sign because you don't want to assume. You explain away the second sign because you trust him. You ignore the third sign because you love him, and love makes you want to believe the best. But by the time you reach the fifth and sixth sign, something inside you already knows. You felt it before you could prove it. You sensed it before you could name it. And that internal knowing is not paranoia. That is your mind processing patterns that your heart hasn't caught up to yet. The most painful part of these situations is never the truth itself. The most painful part is the time spent doubting your own perception, wondering if you are overreacting, wondering if you are being unfair, wondering if the distance you feel is your imagination. It is not your imagination. Behavior is data. And data does not lie when you learn how to read it clearly without emotion clouding the picture. So trust the patterns, trust the clusters, and most importantly, trust the version of yourself that noticed something was wrong before anyone confirmed it for you. That awareness is not weakness. That awareness is the most powerful form of emotional intelligence you will ever develop, because the people who get hurt the most in these situations are not the ones who trusted too little. They are the ones who noticed everything and then convinced themselves they were wrong. They saw the phone flip over, they felt the emotional distance, they noticed the over-explaining. They experienced the small fights that came from nowhere, they felt the physical closeness disappear. And then they talked themselves out of every single sign because they were afraid of what trusting their instincts would mean, because trusting your instincts means making a decision. And making a decision means things might change, and change is terrifying when you have built your emotional world around one person. So instead of acting on what they knew, they waited. They gave more chances. They asked softer questions. They accepted vague answers. They told themselves maybe he is just stressed. Maybe work is difficult right now. Maybe I am being too sensitive. And while they were busy doubting themselves, the situation continued. Time passed, and the clarity they could have had months earlier kept getting buried under the weight of their own hesitation. This is not a failure of intelligence. This is what emotional attachment does to even the sharpest minds. When you love someone, your brain naturally looks for reasons to believe the positive interpretation over the uncomfortable one. That is not weakness, that is human. But awareness is what creates the difference between someone who stays stuck in confusion for years and someone who recognizes what is happening early enough to make a clear and empowered choice about what they want to do next. And that choice does not always have to be leaving. Sometimes the choice is a direct, honest conversation. Sometimes the choice is creating new boundaries. Sometimes the choice is simply deciding to pay closer attention before drawing any conclusion. But none of those choices are available to you if you cannot first see the situation clearly. And you cannot see it clearly if you keep overriding what your instincts are already telling you. Clarity is not cruel. Clarity is the kindest thing you can give yourself when a situation is pulling you in two different directions at once. The goal is never to become suspicious of everyone or to turn love into a constant investigation. The goal is to become someone who is grounded enough in their own perception that they do not need external validation to trust what they are already experiencing. Because the most dangerous place to be in any relationship is the place where you feel something is wrong, but you keep waiting for proof that is clear enough to justify how you feel. Your feelings are already the proof. Behavior is already the evidence. And the moment you stop needing someone else to confirm what you can already see, you step into a completely different level of emotional strength. One that protects you not through walls or distance, but through clarity, self-trust, and the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who knows exactly what they are looking at.